everyone, it's Laura, and today I am here to talk about Big Little Spells. It is the sequel of Small Town Big Magic, and this is actually interesting for me. I read the first book 2 summers ago when I was on vacation with my family, and I liked it less and less the more I thought about it. So the story, obviously I can only share limited details about this book since it's a sequel, but the first book, the main character's name is Emerson, and she and her sister Rebecca are from a small town in Missouri. I forget what the name of it is. St. Cyprian, Missouri, and she was the president of commerce or something similar to that title, and she owned a small bookstore that she inherited from her grandmother. And in that first book, odd stuff starts happening to her, and at that point she discovers that she's actually a witch, that she comes from a long line of witches. Her last name is Wild, and they can tie their name back to the Salem witch trials. And apparently after that fiasco, in the lore of the books, the witches moved their home to St. Cyprian, and this is kind of the new hub of their power, and to have a ruling body called the Joywood. And what happened is that Emerson and her sister Rebecca, like all witches, grew up learning magic, and then when they're 18 they have to pass the test, and if they are proven competent enough, then they graduate to being kind of full-fledged witches in the society. But what happened with them is they were deemed spelldim and that they didn't have enough magical power. So they were given 2 options: exile with the promise to never perform or use magic again, or to have their memory wiped. And Emerson had her memory wiped, and Rebecca, her sister, moved away. And so she had limited contact with her sister, and she had no real reason to understand why. Likewise, her parents are ambassadors, and they left and have never really stuck around the town anymore because they're from such a prestigious witch line. She believes that her parents were ashamed of what has become of their 2 daughters that their grandmother believed would have immense magical gifts, and then to be deemed spelldim and have to be punished in one way or the other. Their parents basically left. But in the first book, Emerson, odd things happen, and Emerson unlocks her magical powers, and her friends who are practicing witches and passed their tests, so they were fully aware of everything that was going on, but they were still her friends. Her friends try and key her in to the details of what happened. They don't understand how she could access the power she could, or what exactly is going on. And the more you get into it, it turns out there are basically bad signs of things to come. And so she tries to form basically a group with her friends, a reclusive, immortal witch in the town that is deemed a traitor, and she tries to rope her sister in. And I don't want to go into more details and spoil the first book. My main issue with that is that I found Emerson, especially the more and more I thought about it, to be an awful viewpoint character. Everything you got was from her point of view. You got her thoughts, and she was almost insufferable because she thought she knew everything, and she didn't like the idea of failing at anything, and she wanted to take charge as a leadership position because she's a natural leader. And I understand there are people like that, and I understand there are natural leaders. And as someone who grew up having success in a lot of ways, especially in school, you know, I understand having that drive for perfection, but it made me angry because in the first book, she was obviously, all of her friends have been in this world with the magic since they were young. They never got their memories wiped. They knew what was going on. And she just would refuse to listen to their advice, no matter what they said. They would promise her, like, don't do anything. We will fill you in on more details tomorrow when we have a chance and we can all get together. And then she would just go off on her own thinking she knew best. And the more and more it got under my skin. But before I let it simmer and before I really realized how much I despised her as a character and how much I would have probably put that book at maybe a 3. I had already ordered the second book, Big Little Spells. And so I have it. Only after it got here and I really thought about it more did I realize how little I liked the first book, which I probably would have demoted maybe to a 2 or a 2.5, just because I wanted to bang my head against the wall for Emerson and her character. And then when I was planning my reading TBR for this autumn, I figured, well, let me at least give this a shot and see if I like it any better or not. And surprise, surprise, I like it a lot better. The reason? Because this book is told in the perspective of her sister, Rebecca. And I like Rebecca. She is much more comfortable for me to listen to, her perspective. And Emerson, when she shows up in her glory of wanting to take charge and make the decisions and be perfect, it's just a background character more so, and it doesn't bother me as much because I'm not in her head where I see her do the stupid things and then I see her think the stupid things. Rebecca is more used to being kind of a family disappointment, and the way she dealt, because she didn't have her memories wiped, so she knew exactly what happened in the past. And so you get some more perspective about them failing the tests and then how hard it was for her after. And part of the reason why she didn't stay in touch with her sister in the first one was because she found it hard to not bring up the past or magic with her sister, because she was worried that her sister wasn't exactly the same sister that she knew. And she just basically tried to reform her life, her new life. And she started off, and she said she did like yoga and different retreats, and she went to therapy. And so being drawn back and having to deal with events, the repercussions after the events of the first book, and she has to come back to this little town, she's basically keeping an eye on her watch, wondering when she'd be able to escape and go back to her life, because she's kind of happy with having put this past behind her. And then, you know, things go from there. I don't want to spoil too much of the plot of this book, since a lot of it has to deal with after the first book. So at this point, I would have rated the first book probably a 2 for 2.5, maybe probably 2. This book, surprising to me, is a 4. Ultimately, I do not want to keep it. I already actually gotten rid of the first book. It's not something that I ever really foresee myself rereading the series, but I did listen to this actually in audiobook form, and there is another one. I guess there's a third book already out, and a fourth book is on the way spring of next year. I hope they don't drag this out too much, because at that point I'll probably give up on it for good. But I actually am curious in following up and continuing the series. And the third book is on audiobook and Everend as well. So I will be listening to the third book, but I will be getting rid of this physical copy. It was a very unexpected and pleasant surprise that I enjoyed this book as much as I did. And I guess that just proves to me that as much as I might like to think that unlikable main characters are okay, that maybe I'm not as okay with them as I'd like to think, and that I'm more okay with unlikable side characters. I guess I would just have to read more and see what the ultimate result is of that. But I definitely would never want to reread the first book. I even considered trying to skim it, but I thought I remembered enough of the details where I really didn't feel like I missed out on anything between not rereading that book and then reading this one 2 years later. So I'm actually, like I said, pleasantly surprised with this book. And yeah, I would give it a rating of 4. So that's it for this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.